My greatest desire is to leave my testimony and to tell you, my grandkids, and whoever watches this, what is important to me in this life and what made me what I am today. I want you to know what I know. And in fact, in my lifetime, I've called it what I believe. But I'm past the belief part, and it's what I know. And not did it make me into what I am, but I came from a family, a mother and father, who I am the seventh child of 10 children. And we lived, as I was growing up, in Hanksville, Utah, which is a very small town. And we lived about 3 miles from town. And the roads to and from Hanksville were dirt roads. And if it was stormy, they were impassable if it was a lot of rain and a big storm. And if you needed to go to buy groceries, for instance, because Hanksville only had a beer joint that carried a few things that they considered necessary groceries, and so they were very limited. But they did have, I don't remember them having milk because people who lived in Hanksville all had a cow that they milked. And I'm professing that I know how to milk a cow. I don't know what that means or how important that is, but we were isolated and we learned to help each other. And I mean, I don't, probably 100, maybe 150 people, I would say more like 100, lived in the Hanksville area. And they were ranchers and farmers. And so if you broke your leg and you had to go to the hospital to have it fixed, it was 100 miles to Richfield, Utah, or it was 100 miles to Price, Utah, where there was medical care.
And these weren't roads, these weren't freeways, these were roads.
They were not paved, and when it rained, it was muddy, and there were washes that you had to cross. That I remember times that we had to wait on one side of the whichever side we were on until the water went down enough that we could get through that. And if it was a big flood that came down those washes, you had to wait for somebody to come and clear a path through it so you could drive your car to the other side. We never went anywhere without water, and it was usually in a canvas water bag for that purpose. And if you hung it on the front of your car, front of the radiator or whatever, where you could hang it from, it would even be cooler. So you never went anywhere without water. And usually we took that water bag plus a 5-gallon can of water. And we always had food, because I do remember being stranded and very thankful to have something to eat, thanks to my mother. And you always had a blanket. You were prepared because you didn't know. And because the roads were bad, in inclement weather, when you went to Price, for instance, which now takes from Hanksville to Price, probably takes less than 2 hours to get there. But then you had to plan on 3.5 hours. And it was the same going to Richville. And so you learned in an emergency to help yourself. And that made me, I think, was a big part of how I turned out. I wanted you to know the circumstances that I grew up in. And we were totally self-sufficient because my dad was born in 1896. My mother was born in 1903, and their parents too had to learn to be self-sufficient because you didn't, in fact, where I grew up, we didn't have electricity. And if you were rich enough, you could have a power plant and have electricity in your house. Or you could have drilled a well and had water in your house, which I was born in 1939, which no conveniences at all that you didn't have to labor to find and to get them. And Hanksville, Utah Power and Light would not bring across the desert, wouldn't put in power poles and such. And so we had kerosene lamps, and my mother had the chore of she had to wash the chimneys and trim the wicks every day. And we didn't have any refrigeration. We had a box covered in burlap that Daddy had tacked it up to one of our big old cottonwood trees that was next to the house. So it was always in the shade. And that was us kids' job to every hour or so to go soak it in water. And so made the milk and whatever was in there taste a lot better if it was a little bit cool. My mother, we had a big garden. And it was very necessary because it was 100 miles to a big grocery store. Mm-hmm. And so, and the beer joint in Hanksville didn't carry it. But it was a good life. And I remember that working in the garden was something my dad prepared the garden and my brothers, and then Mother would plant it and Daddy would make sure it got irrigated and stuff, which the irrigation just started more weeds growing. But I remember that as soon as you were able, my first job in the garden was to plant onion sets.
Still remember that now.
I remember that because all I needed to know was which end of the onion had the roots and put it root down. And as I outgrew that, I got a little older, then I planted other things. But I learned right away which were weeds that you pull and which were vegetables that you didn't pull. And because I was a proud little girl and I liked to be helpful. I learned that easy, and I want to add to that because I was so excited when Jamie and I moved to Grantsville with our family because I had a garden spot. And your dad, Jamie, Grandpa, he wanted to help me when he was home and could. And I learned right away that I could teach him which was a carrot and which was a weed and which was a tomato plant and which was a weed. And he remembered it all the time that I was out there by him. But in 2 or 3 days, when he was out there alone, he couldn't remember which was weeds and which was the plant. So I replanted several things.
Now you said Grantsville. Did you mean Gateway?
No, I meant Grantsville. I did not have a garden until we moved to Grantsville. When we lived in that arena, remember Grandma Dyer? We planted a garden for her and for us. And remember when we took care of her when she broke her ankle?
I do.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. And I've looked her up on our genealogy or to see how she was, because remember, she was a convert to the church, and she was in her 90s when she was baptized. And, she was a dear soul. And she evidently took to me and my family because when she broke her ankle, she wouldn't let anybody but me and my kids take care of her. And remember, somebody had to stay with her all night, and she had the office chair that had wheels on them, and she'd put her broken knee up on the chair and kick with the other one and travel around her house. And James wanted to stay with her, and one night you kids wanted to take turns. I think you, Bruce, were too young, but
I think she let me do it once.
Yeah, probably.
Just so that I would get a turn.
Yeah, just so you could say you did.
Yeah.
But she had a big old king size bed. And I remember when James almost changed his mind when he realized he had to sleep in the same bed with Grandma Dyer. But she had him way over on one side, and she is way over on the other side of that king size bed. And she always had the same thing for breakfast: a cup of Ovaltine and the egg.
She poached them.
Yeah, and she poached.
Didn't she do all brand cereal too?
Yes. Hey, and I understand why now. Yeah. So, but life is what you make it. And what you see around you is what you develop. And my mother and dad, I don't know. In fact, June and I were talking about it today. That when you, I'm having fun now.
Good.
But when you read obituaries, everybody always sounds perfect when whoever wrote it up. And so we got to talking about our mother and dad. And you know what? They really were perfect. But never, ever in a lifetime would any one of us kids ever know or were able to keep track of the things that my mother did for other people. And she thought that food was the answer to every whatever you had, it started the healing process. And so I remember one time she made a cake for somebody in Hanksville that was, I don't remember what was wrong with them, but maybe, or for the whole family, but she made this cake. And why I remember that one is because we'd went somewhere and Daddy was working, but he had got home while we were gone. And we went in the house and we was gonna go to Hanksville and take that cake to whoever it was intended for. And it had one piece gone out of it. And of course, she accused each one of us kids of having a piece of cake. But it turned out to be Daddy that had had a piece of cake. But we took it the way it was. It had one piece out of it, but we took it. But Mother, we planted that big garden, and it really wasn't just for us, because anybody that came to visit my mother and dad, and some people did it on a regular basis, why, nobody ever went away from our house hungry or with a bunch of produce out of the garden. And Mother had that big old apron that she wore every day except Sunday, that she never took a bucket out to the garden. She just picked stuff and held her apron out, put it in the apron, and then would bring it to the house and we'd wash it and take care of it. And but we'll never ever know how much food that my mother took to everybody that needed it. And even when, well, we were in Hanksville and we had this, his name was John Ecker. And I remember him as being alone. So his wife, if he had one, probably had died. But every week, probably the same day, but I don't, every week he did it. But he would come and my mother would fix him a breakfast. Some of those pancakes that you said. But I would stand there in awe because I like to watch him eat, because the one time in particular, I watched him and she fed him a dozen eggs, fried eggs, and numerous pieces of toast. And she had canned fruit. These were peaches. And she set a quart of peaches on the table. And he ate a quart of peaches.
Dozen eggs.
A dozen eggs, toast, and peaches. And then when he left to go home, Mother gave him a dozen eggs and stuff out of the garden. And he did that every week. But you have to remember, I was born in 1939, and that was during the continuation of the Great Depression. And there was a war on, and people didn't have nothing. And they had to have coupons, government coupons, that allowed them to buy the things that were scarce. Like you had to have a gas coupon, you had to have flour and sugar coupons, and so we were better off than most everybody else in the Hanksville area, because we had that big garden. We had chickens that laid eggs. We started out with 100 chickens that came in the mail.
You told me about that.
Yeah. And we ate the roosters and tended the hens and
So
had eggs.
was it a big box with like holes in it so they could
They were.
breathe?
It was a big box about that square, and that had holes in it to get air into the box. And it's too bad we didn't have phones, because I'm sure that the postmaster would have called us. There's chickens coming. Would you come and get them?
Because they made a lot of noise.
Oh yeah, they peep 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 peep. It's just they were
Little chicks.
noisy,
Little
and they
little
were
chicks.
they were like, probably by the time they came to our house, they were probably about 5 days old. And we'd put them behind the heater, the coal heater, the wood heater. It was in the living room.
You got them early spring,
Right.
right?
We'd get them in April. Yeah. They were Easter chicks. But she'd build a fire in that stove, and it was in the corner like that curio cabinet, only it set out so that there was a space around and behind the stove that Mother would put those chickens so they didn't freeze to death in the night. So
As they grew up, if they turned out to be a rooster, it was fried chicken, huh?
yes, or chicken and noodles and chicken and dumplings. Yeah. And they turned out usually to be 50-50. Half were roosters. And did I ever tell you about your dad gave me 22 for my 17th birthday? Remember how he loved guns? Yeah, he gave me a 22. And I was old enough that she had taught me how to chop their heads off. And she'd send me out to get a rooster. It had to be a rooster. And this one day, after Jamie had given me that gun, why, she told me to please go get a chicken so we could have it for supper. And I decided to shoot it. And
this gun.
yeah, because before I'd been taught how to hold the wings back with one hand so the wings wouldn't flop all over and flog me. And I'd hold the legs and put it across a piece of wood and have the axe like this and chop its head off. And then I got so I liked to skin it because I hated to scald it and pull its feathers off. They stink. But I took that gun and went out towards the chicken coop, and of course we always let them out in the daytime and then shut them up at night. And so I couldn't see any chickens anywhere. I don't know where they were. So I went over by the corral, and I could see this rooster inside the corral. And he was standing off, but there were horses and cows over here getting a drink out of the canal. And so I look around, and I aimed at that rooster at the same time that he stretched his neck out and crowed. And shot him right in the head. And then I looked around and I thought, what if I killed something else? So, but I did enjoy it, that I hit him right in the eye.
Did you brag to Dad that you had?
I'm sure I did, but I don't remember. Because I probably would have told him. Well, in fact, my dad, knew about it and stuff. And at that time, Jamie worked for my brother Kent. He's driving one of Kent's trucks. And so I'm sure that my dad was proud that I went and shot the rooster, but I never did it again because I realized that I could have hit something else because that chicken wasn't big enough to stop a bullet. It would have went off.